Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. In this lecture, today we will be covering the topic of community smart citizenship and the digital divide. The contents that we will cover today in the lecture are smart cities and inequality, concept and definition of the digital divide, types and stages of the digital divide, factors that influence the digital divide. Then we will be discussing about how we can overcome the digital divide, smart citizenship, the concept, definition and categories, and also we will discuss some cases to reflect more on them. We will also discuss about the digital community, and then we will start analyzing the smart citizenship in the Indian scenario, and then we will also understand how we can become smart citizens through different scholars. So when dealing with the concept of the smart cities, the most important element that comes up after the ICT and smart technologies are the citizens who are the users and the beneficiaries of this. However, there are elements that lead to unequal access and usage, giving rise to inequalities fostered by smart technologies within the smart cities. In this lecture, we will cover the digital divide, which influences and expands the already existing inequalities within the smart cities. At the same time, we will also discuss the solution in the form of smart citizenship that can make use of the smart cities to make them more sustainable. According to Griffin and others, smart cities comprise of the regional competitiveness within transport and ICT economies, natural resources, human and social capital, quality of life, and the participation of citizens in the governance of the cities. Adding to this, Harrison suggested that such smart city infrastructure tends to leverage the collective intelligence of the city. However, there exist social and digital inequalities within the smart cities that is exacerbated by the different citizen capabilities and location biases within the smart cities, among others. Additionally, digital inequality causes social deprivation in the smart cities. According to Zeng, this establishes exclusion, both social and digital, based on the individual's capacity, causing them to be socially excluded in the digital society. A vicious circle of the social and digital exclusion is therefore established. Within this, the digital divide plays an active role. Let us then discuss this concept of digital divide in detail before we understand the citizens and the community which operate within the smart cities. To date back the coinage, Lloyd Morissette, president of the Markle Foundation, is given the credit to introduce the term the digital divide, which was a divide between the information haves and the have-nots according to the Hoffman and others. And over time, Willem explains it has slowly structured itself as a social justice issue in the 21st century. According to Hoffman, Nowak and Schlocker, digital divide deals with the gaps between demographies and regions that have access to the modern information and communication technology and those who have restricted or no access or usage. According to Bruno and others, with time, this divide has moved beyond ICT access and usage and is being perceived as a multidimensional phenomenon that includes a set of complex divides like the global, social and the democratic, caused by a variety of factors like the digital resources, gender, income, etc. It now covers large arenas with an evolved definition as unequal patterns of the material access to, usage capabilities of, and benefit from computer-based ICTs are caused by certain stratification processes that produce classes of winners and losers of the information society and of participation in institutions governing ICTs and the society. In general, the three major decisive factors according to Ragneda include the access divide, the usage divide, and the third divide, which is determined by the degree of productive usage. According to Park, some illustration of the digital exclusion reinforce the social exclusion, and the concept of the third level digital divide as given by Ragneda analyze the reinforcement or empowerment of such social exclusion from the digital exclusions or inclusion through the usage and adoption of the digital platforms. This aspect of larger inequalities is reasoned out by examining the absence of certain capabilities and deprivation in the e-society. Castells establishes the interlinkages of information technology, globalization and social development and finds that the interlinkages signals a global bane of information capitalism, indicating the effects of the digital divide to have larger implication. There are basically four stages of digital divide according to Shelvin. The first stage is the formal or theoretical access to ICT and the content. This stage basically comprises of ICT being available at home, in community setting and in other spaces that is available to an individual in theory. The second stage is effective access to ICT and its content. This stage comprises of the ICT being available at home, in the community setting and in other places that the individual feels that they are able to access. This form of use may or may not be meaningful in the long run, or even may or may not have consequences. The third stage, according to Shelvin, is the engagement with ICTs and the content. This stage comprises of the meaningful access and use where the users exercise a certain degree of control and choice over the content and the technology. The last stage he speaks about is the outcomes and consequences, which might be short term, medium term or long term. According to him, these take places in the form of productive, political, social, savings and consumption activity. Additionally, Shelvin explains that the digital divide has also been influenced by Bourdieu's concept of capital, and the digital divide is influenced by an individual's social, economic and cultural capital as well as the technological capital he or she possesses. Having discussed about the stages of digital divide, now let us discuss why it is important to have digital inclusivity. According to Graham, the access to internet now is a fundamental right. In countries like Finland, Costa Rica, Estonia, these countries consider the access to internet as a fundamental right and a human right in countries like France, Greece and Spain. Hence, the lack of access and usage at preliminary level becomes an issue and of radical importance in the developed country. According to Roos, in due course of time, the developing nations are also shedding light on the same. With heightened intensities, the divide seemed to cause a gap in the information that is available and hence attracted a lot of attention from the advocacy group, scholars and the policymakers worldwide. According to Farhadi and others, even though there is a huge boom in the information and communication technology adoption, many developing as well as developed countries still face the problem regarding the access and the usage of the broadband and the mobile network facilities. There has been expanding research in this realm of digital inequality, such as the mapping of the local geographies in Britain, showing the divide of the internet usage in the UK, or an inquest on the barrier faced by older adults in addressing the grey digital divide, which was referred to by Morris and Lee. Although some studies infer a positive trend in the access, usage, and adoption parameters in the United States, the Gerontological Society of America shows the impact of factors such as usability, affordability, accessibility, confidence, independence, compatibility, reliability, social and technical support, and the cost, which act as barrier to adoption. These work resonate the escalating inequalities in the digital arena. Other scholars explain that the influence of the digital divide. For example, Polinix Ali Husad in their article Bridging Digital Divide explain the various types of inequalities that result from the digital divide. These include inequalities of access and use, unequal capabilities, engagement, and usage outcome. Although digital access gap seems to close in many countries, the marginalized section does not benefit from it as established by various scholars. There seems to be a stark difference between the access, the first order divide, and the actual use, the second order divide, as explained by Beruka and others. Other than the external influences of access and capabilities as we discussed, there are other factors that also influence the degree of digital inclusion. These include an individual's motivation, personality traits like the openness, and the digital skills. When we consider the digital world, then elderly population is a part of the generation who are called the digital immigrants, while those who have been exposed to the digital media from a very young age are considered as the digital natives. However, the digital services affect different sections of the population differently. The elder sections of the society is always a heterogeneous group, having variable degree of digital skills and digital practice. We find studies in UK have shown that more than 70% of old adults use smartphones. However, this data may vary from country to country, and such adoption is also largely influenced by the socio-economic and the cultural scenarios within different countries. Further, there are certain hindrances for the elderly adults such as fear and anxiety regarding the usage of the digital technologies and the services. The negative attitude of feeling that they do not or they are too old for learning, lack of knowledge, and difficulties understanding the digital technology as emphasized by Holgerson and Stodderstam. Family support, hence, in these cases play a key role for developing mobile internet skill literacy. Now let us discuss the digital divide and the marginalized population groups. For the marginalized section, there are barriers like the language barrier. For example, this is applicable for the refugees and the immigrants or those not well educated in the dominant language of the country that they are residing. The second is practical resource limitation. For example, the socially excluded and distressed urban areas and remote rural areas can cause social exclusion and hinder the process of digital technologies assimilation throughout the society. The first level digital divide therefore requires effort from the marginalized population group if they want to be digitally included. In the case of general population, there are certain studies that depict which section of the population are more inclined towards the digital inclusion and exclusion. For example, one study by Pick and others showed a positive influence of the managerial, science, arts occupation or innovation and social capital on the usage of the digital technologies. Further, another study conducted within the white and the Hispanic owned small and medium enterprise in the United States by Middleton and Chambers indicated some level of inequality related to the ethnicity and age, where younger white small and medium enterprise owners were better off and better positioned. Other studies highlighted the influence of income distribution, educational levels, and ethnicity on the levels of access to the internet in the United States. Low level of education and income below the poverty line still tends to lead a higher proportion of people with no internet access as found by Davis and others. Further, differences in skill can lead to digital inequalities. Even when individuals have equal access to the digital technologies was established by Burrich and Shan. Taking a differentiated view on skills is needed to understand the technology use and no use according to Renaissance and other. Further, there are other factors like the physical skill which also influences the digital inequalities. Like users with disabilities, according to Pergith and Quengnan, can be digitally disadvantaged and despite the benefits promised by the specialized assisted technologies or assistive technologies, their adoption rate could fall of expectations. Thus, to bring in the digital inclusion, policy should be formulated to close the digital divide between and within the region of people, crafting policies for the underprivileged group to improve their skills like reading, writing, and software use would enable their meaningful engagement with the digital platforms as was suggested by Burrich and Shan. Effective evaluation mechanisms are also needed for the development of new policies addressing the digital divide as suggested by Shang and others. Some studies have also found that contemporary workplaces impart the IT education to their employees even when they are close to retirement, adding to the development of the digital inclusion of the digitally excluded. Proper training and education can help in mitigating the digital inequalities as suggested by Van Dyck. Further, ICT solutions should take into account individual differences within their design and development to create proper stimuli for different user groups with different capabilities. Considering the digital divide, when we consider the smart cities, then there lies the concern of digital inclusion, which tends to influence the growth of the smart citizens. But who are these smart citizens? Let us first discuss them. To define the smart citizens, they are the ones who or those who use the internet regularly and effectively, acknowledging the degree of responsibility in using the technology and ways of participating within the digital community. These consider the degree of digital literacy, etiquettes, online safety, and an acknowledgement of the private versus the public information, as suggested by Karen Mosenberg. Shadoway and Shekhar call such a form of use in daily life and social political setting as the smart citizenship. In times where well-being accompanies digital inclusion, it is essential to equip citizens with technologies know-how that could render the proper exploitation of the smart human capital, making use of their digital capital. However, smart citizenship has been observed to favor the well-off, ignoring the technologically illiterate and the poor marginalized. According to Shelton and Ladato, in their article Actually Existing Smart Citizens, Expert and Non-Participation in Making the Smart City, explain that smart citizens can be considered active participants, passive recipients, an entrepreneur, a consumer, an obligation, or a business opportunity. Smart citizens have been categorized in the form of general citizens and absent citizens. According to them, the general citizens are a vessel of stereotype, a means by which the status quo is preserved. And the absent citizens are the non-participants in the making of the smart cities or the citizens absent in the substantive element of the smart cities. These citizens face exclusion in discourse and material practice while also comprising the excluded and the ignored sections and those who do not participate in the functions of the smart cities. Further, the citizens are mostly invoked by the auspices of the stewardship. However, according to the scholars, actually existing smart citizens might not exist at all. Smart citizenship exists for the one holding power and expertise. Thus, the discourse and the practice miss the actual participation within the power geometry and need for democratic citizenship and the city making. According to Janelle Lee, Orlando Woods and Lily Kong in their article Towards More Inclusive Smart Cities, reconciling the divergent realities of data and discourse at the margins, they explain that smart citizens can be considered as active and passive in nature. Further, they suggest that the digital divide is an issue that influences the nature of smart citizenship, as mostly the urban elites are favored in this context. According to Shadoway and Shekhar, there is a need to reprioritize the local necessities rather than re-engineering the cities and the citizens. Here they find the essence of smart cities become an antithesis to the smart citizens due to the exclusionary nature of the commercialized smart city policies. The authors highlight the need for a more complex civic cyber intelligence system where the system should be democratic and equitable, also prioritizing civic decision making within the processes, respecting community needs and covering the requirement of political accountability. The authors applied their perspective on the case of Chennai Smart City in India to assess how citizens might reassert or re-insist their voices and visions in the ICT-linked urban planning and governance. The work of the Transparent Chennai was analyzed for this reason. Transparent Chennai exemplar demonstrates an potential for smarter or more engaged and transparent governmentality. While the main approach of community mapping and public advocacy helped in countering the threats of a commercialized smart city agenda. The research thus highlights the essence of community defined infrastructure needs and priorities, such as poor access to the public toilets or growing threats from the automobiles to the pedestrian safety and the urban quality of life. Another example to understand the idea of smart city can be witnessed through the exploration of the material participation of the urban bottom-up movement in Amsterdam. This has been given by Sabine Neiderer and Ruud Priester in their article Smart Citizen Exploring the Tools of Urban Bottom-up Movement, and from their exploration the authors have concluded that the phenomenon of material participation through the use of website for the urban bottom-up movement exists in Amsterdam and is growing rapidly since 2010 in terms of the number of websites. The digital tools are usually websites in roughly three distinct categories. Website used by communities for whom their neighborhood is an issue. The next comes the website for communities that are locally oriented but are focused on specific issues within the neighborhood. And the last are the websites that are not related to a specific neighborhood. Flory and Schneider states that the smart community is the new digital utopia. When we talk about the digital community, its idea is defined by what a smart citizen itself should be. According to Schneider, the main characteristics of the smart cities are to be efficient, creative, and engaged in the digital domain. Further, the scholars also state that a smart community should look to be resilient, connected, and sustainable within the urban areas. Schneider introduces the idea of the digital feudalism derived from the different studies undertaken in Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and India, where the study concludes that elites co-opt the idea of community to push their solution paradigm for urban and social development. In the Indian scenario, Datta, in her article, The Digital Turn in Post-Colonial Urbanism, Smart Citizenship in the Making of India's 100 Smart Cities, highlights the nature of Indian citizens and smart citizenship. According to her, smart citizen in India cannot be cannot be seen through the binary lenses of subject or citizen, but rather an amorphous and dialectic identity across three overlapping vectors. Smart cities and its digital turn within India can be looked at from the perspective of post-colonial urbanism. Their presence is through three different processes. First is the enumeration, like the first track citizens, the action and mentioning several things one by one. For example, through citizen consultation of a digital population that has been hidden. The second is performances. This aspect basically depicts how citizens are becoming smart citizens. This is mainly through an online practices of how to become smart citizens, online practices. The third one is the breaches. This aspect opens up the space for pirate modernity, which refers to the subaltern citizens where they refuse to participate in the data governance. In the last process of breaching, a transition takes place, giving rise to what Datta terms as the Chatur citizen. According to Datta, the Chatur citizen speaks from the position of subalternity to challenge the power and to replicate the very form of power. Therefore, both a compliant subject and an active citizen moving beyond these two possibilities. Datta therefore highlights the need for further research along these lines lies in the assessment of the subaltern citizenship from the urban and the digital lens. Along these lines, me and my PhD student Maitri Malik have worked on the gap and developed a paper that is under peer review, which basically highlights the perspective of the citizen inclusivity within the Indian smart cities through the theoretical lenses of 7 stages of the digital divide and the right to the smart city by the Kitchen and Cardulo. Within this analysis, our study finds that the presence of Datta's discursive Chatur citizenry in certain scenarios. When in the pandemic management within the smart cities of India was analyzed. According to Helen Manchester and Gillian Cope, who adopted the ethnographic method to study the assumption about learning in a Europe-wide smart city project that included a component of citizen-led development, they found that there are certain theories and forms of learning that are required for citizens to play a role in the development of the digital urban futures. And the smart city planners and developers are keen to include these citizens in the smart city development. This indicates the need to adopt effective and customized smart learning models for the citizens. The two models of learning selected here include the creative citizen learning approach and the banking model approach. According to the scholars, the former assumes that learners are active, creative, waiting and engaging to learn new technology with ideological learning practices, while the latter consider the citizens are containers waiting to be filled with the digital knowledge and skills necessary to engage in new, inevitable smart futures. This considers the citizens to contribute to a positive urban development themselves, acting as a tool learning the new technologies over time rather than just adopting to it, with facilitation through the ULBs and the functioning lab or functioning living labs within it. It suggests that the current banking models of learning adopted in relation to the citizen participation are not fit for the purpose and that a new model is needed. This needs to recognize the citizen learning as situated in the social and the material context and embedded in unequal relation of power, knowledge and resources. In the next lecture, we will be covering another interesting dimension which are the urban commons. Thank you for listening and have a great day ahead.